tonight's meeting. My name is Bethany Coughlin. I'm the principal of North Carmel Middle School. I'm joined by Jay Masterson, who is the principal of McCourt Middle School, and Adolfo Costa, who is the principal of Cumberland High School. And we also have Mr. Damana, and I believe Mr. Mitchell is online as well. And if there's anyone I'm missing, Mike, if you could let me know. We're going to start, we're going to provide you with information as it pertains to the distance learning plan at the secondary level. The plans have been posted on the district website, but we know that there are certainly quite a few questions, and hopefully the information that we provide tonight will answer your questions. If they do not, we will allow for, and we will be happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So if Mike, you could bring up the presentation. Again, welcome to tonight's forum. We are going to be focusing on the distance learning plans at the secondary level. Next slide. Tonight we'll review the secondary plans, and then we will follow that by questions. The presentation will be brief to give you the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. So an overview of distance learning, of the plans that were developed. For the distance learning plan starting on Monday, students are expected to participate in 5 days of learning per week. Within those 5 days of learning, direct teacher instruction will take place with small groups, approximately 2 to 3 times per week. And we'll get more into that as I show you the schedule moving forward. We took pods of approximately 26 students or class sizes, and we divided those pods into 2 groups. That would be group A and group B. Most of the time is divided by alphabet. There is a little bit of variety in terms of where we needed to divide it based on certain circumstances. If for some reason we have a division that results in students at multiple schools or at different levels being in different groups, we will certainly work on accommodating those. But for the most part, we did our best to balance our groups so that the instructional groups were small and aligned. And those instructional groups will be meeting with teachers on alternating days. Students are expected to attend all classes on their schedule for the entire school day in which they're assigned to instruction. Students who are assigned to not receive direct instruction will be working on independent tasks that were assigned previously. Classes, when they are in session, will run approximately 45 to 50 minutes, and that's across both the middle schools and the high school. Monday is considered an early release day, which results in shorter class times. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the class length is about 45 to 50 minutes. Attendance is extremely important in the distance learning plan and distance learning format. Our focus for this year and our goal is high student engagement. And to that end, we will be taking attendance each day, daily attendance in homeroom. Students are expected to submit their attendance for the day, but students who are scheduled to be in session, attendance will be taken at the start of each period. Our hope and our goal is for full student engagement and participation in their learning as they would in a typical school day. And curriculum and assessment is planned and expected and will align with grade level and course level standards. Next slide, please. So the first 30 days of learning, we have broken up the week into 2 instructional meeting sessions for each group, as well as 1 instructional meeting session that will combine the 2 groups. Our goal was consistency across all cohorts, as well as maximum instruction time within the parameters that we're working in. So Monday, group A and B will meet with their teachers. So Monday is set up as a day in which students will follow their school schedule, and they will both groups will be meeting with their teachers at once. Now that doesn't necessarily result in a full instructional class. Monday is going to be used for a variety of purposes, whether it be small group instruction, whether it be providing feedback to students, or working with the teacher on a particular class. But Monday, both groups will be expected to follow their school day schedule. Tuesday and Thursday is set aside for Group A to meet with their teachers. So they will follow their daily school schedule, all periods, and they will meet with each teacher for the allotted class time, which is again 45 to 50 minutes. On those days, Group B is engaging in independent tasks. Now, Group B, the premise around Group B is that they will be working off instruction or direction from the teacher. However, the teachers will not be accessible to the Group B students while they are working with the Group A students. Group B receives their instruction on Wednesday and Friday, where they are meeting with the teachers, they are following their class schedule. When a group is not following the class schedule, not scheduled to meet the teachers, the tasks are expected to be completed, but it's not going to be done in a structured manner in terms of a time schedule. They will be expected to have all of their tasks completed by the next instructional day. Next slide. So this gives you an indication as to what the month is going to look like. This is actually pertains to North Carmel Middle School, hence the colors red and white. But it is the same for all three schools in that Monday, both groups are meeting with the teacher in their Google Meets and following the school schedule. And then Group A has instruction Tuesday, Wednesday. Group B has instruction Wednesday, Friday. So it shows you the balance of instructional minutes across the two groups over the course of the month. And then if you go down one more, if we switch to the next slide, it gives you the calendar for October as well. And then you see where the 30th day is located. At that time, our expectation is to then transition, whether it be at that time or prior to that time, to the in-person hybrid model. What is beneficial about starting in an alternating A-B schedule is that the transition to the hybrid model is seamless. Schedule doesn't change, pods do not change, groups do not change. The only difference is Group A, when you are meeting and you have opted for in-person instruction, Group A is going to be doing that in school. Group A distance learning is going to be doing that from home, but again, following the school schedule. And the same is true for Group B on their instructional days. Next slide. So why an alternating model? When we looked at all of the data that was provided to us in terms of what families were opting for distance learning until January, and what families were opting for in-person learning once that option became available, that gave us certain parameters we needed to work within in terms of staffing, in terms of providing students with the courses that they were assigned to have, whether it be in-person or distance learning. So after all the data was collected and discussions were made across all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, it was decided that the alternating model would be the best model for secondary students to begin the year and also to transition into in-person hybrid. Staffing was a huge consideration, and as well as the benefit, and this was a discussion with the teachers as well, the benefit of small Google Meets as compared to large Google Meets on a daily basis. Something that we learned from the spring is that to manage 26 students in a Google Meet is a challenging task. The benefit of having the alternating model allows groups, much smaller groups. In my case, it would be no more than 15 students who are meeting at a time. And what that results in is focused instruction and targeted support. Again, I mentioned that the smooth transition to the in-person hybrid model is another benefit. And it aligns instruction for all pods so that there's an equity in terms of where we are moving students from the beginning of the year to either the end of the year or when we transition back to full in person, whatever that may be, or whenever that may be, the instruction is aligned. So lessons we learned from spring 2020, which were a lot. We learned that clear expectations are vital. We learned that frequent communication among staff, with students, and especially with parents was something that we needed to focus on moving into this school year. We also have been having conversations about the importance of structure and routines, high accountability, student accountability, and providing them with a very clear structure and sticking to the routines of the school day. Direct instruction in smaller groups is something that we approved upon for this school year. We struggled with student engagement and providing students with the support they needed back in the spring. We did it, the teachers worked extremely hard, and I can honestly say that we did the best we could in the situation that we were in, but we're looking at this year very differently. And we know the importance of starting the school year in distance learning and really promoting that student engagement, because we have to get to know the kids in a very different platform than last year. As I said, student accountability, but we're also looking to streamline Google Classroom. Some of the feedback that I received from parents is that Google Classroom looks very different from classroom to classroom. So throughout the school, we're looking to streamline the Google Classroom. So navigating, not only the student navigating that platform, but the parent navigating that platform becomes a lot easier. And in that, on that same note, we are going to be providing training for parents on Google Classroom and also on Aspen, because it's so important that we, both the teachers and the parents, as well as the students, are able to understand the progress that their child is making. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Costa if he could jump in and talk about some of the shifts from spring to fall.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Coughlin. So in spring 2020, we knew that we were going in an instant from in-person learning to this distant learning model that none of us were very familiar with. So at that time, we set up structures that we knew were more flexible, eased time a little bit, eased student responsibility when it came to completing work. And we would expect, and I think our community is expecting, a more robust schedule going into fall of 2020. Already, I see some questions about why we're not meeting virtually every day. And Mrs. Coughlin already got into it a little bit about, the idea of the smaller groups. One of the biggest feedbacks we got from staff members at all levels, and I'm sure you noticed this as parents at home, it was very difficult for students to be engaged in a classroom of 26 kids on a screen. So we we felt by reducing the number of kids and going into a hybrid model right from day one, that teachers would be able to be more in tune with the needs of their students and resulting in better engagement of their students. And keep in mind that in a regular instructional model, regardless of we're in face-to-face or in this distant learning, very often we teach our students or we introduce a concept or a skill, then they're given time to practice. What's happening here is that practice time is happening on the second day. So in a longer block, that might happen in one setting, but we don't have a scheduled bit like that. Now, with all that said, we have made some tremendous improvements and increased accountability going from spring to fall. And if you look at this chart, last year there were times where students were only meeting with their teachers twice a week for 30 minutes at a time. Oh, we just lost that screen. Here we go. this week with fall, with that Monday whole group session, the whole roster, and then 2 meetings per week, students will now be guaranteeing at least 3 meetings with your teacher per week. Last year, you had a potential of 30 minutes of contact time with their teacher. This year, we're saying at least a minimum of, and at the high school, we're looking at 42 minutes over 3 meetings. So that's a substantial increase in contact time between students and teachers. Last year in spring of 2020, at least at the high school, we defaulted to looking at progress assessments only to measure learning as we learn more about this learning environment. While this year we are committed to embedding, again, both summative and progress assessment practices in our teaching. Last year, while the schedule was more flexible, this year we're more structured and we're looking at students meeting with teachers every day, every day on that A-B hybrid for about 42 minutes. And then again, I want to reiterate this. We're going from Google Meets with 25 students, and you know, as a society, we're more familiar with these virtual meetings, and even being involved with sometimes the administrative meetings from the district that we do on a daily basis. When you have upwards of 20 to 25 people in a meeting, sometimes it's difficult to be heard. And so I think for a student, that becomes, you know, there's a loss of interest if it's difficult for them maybe to ask a question. So the smaller groups should at least for a lead to an opportunity for students to be more engaged in their work. And I think what this has allowed to do last year with the smaller meeting times, less times per week, we were more focused on, all right, guys, I just want to review the assignments that you will be doing in this independent time. Now, we can really be focused on the instruction for those 40 to 45 minutes and then allow students to practice what they've learned the next day. So we think these shifts going from a spring to this fall model, while students might not be meeting with their teachers every day, has really enhanced how we will deliver schooling to students this fall. Thanks, Ms. Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. So on the, you know, what I provided to you, and if you could click on the middle school schedule, Mike, just to show you very quickly what a school day is going to look like. We do have a class schedule that is outlined for the students, beginning at 8 a.m. at the middle school, finishing at 2:30 p.m. We do have opportunities for obviously lunch and breaks between classes, but the expectation is that students will attend when they are assigned to their for instruction on that day. They are attending school for a full school day. On the days that they are not attending school, they are working on the tasks that were assigned on that previous school day. So as Mr. Costa used the word robust, that's exactly what we're trying to develop with this model of learning as we enter into this school year. And I think there's also an opportunity to show the high school schedule.
So I'm not seeing that on my screen, but I'll just talk about the high school schedule because I did see a question from a parent that referenced when students are on their independent learning day, will they have access to their teachers? What we've done in our schedule, and you'll be able to see this, and this information was sent out and will be shared again, is that we actually have kind of built in the small office hours time where teachers can go in and look at their emails to see if students have attempted to contact them for clarification or for other purposes in order for them to progress in their learning on those independent days.
At the middle level, we are a little bit more structured in our schedule, but what we're looking to do is provide opportunity in the schedule similar to what the high school is providing for office hours for those students that are at home. We're working on that now, which we are balancing the need for student support with the opportunity to free up teachers for that purpose. So, but our goal is to give the at-home students the opportunity to connect with their teacher if they have any questions. That's it. Well, that's it, basically the overview of what the distance learning plan is. And at this time, we'd be happy to take any questions that you have pertaining to the start of school. Thank you very much for your attention.
So I can start with the questions in the chat. So the first one is that there was a thought that virtual classes would meet every day, not 2 days a week. And that's a great question. That was something that we had talked about at length as an administrative team. But as we moved into the more hybrid model of distance learning and in-person learning, we wanted to make sure that there was equity amongst all students and opportunities for learning. That was number one on our list. And also, as Mr. Costa and Mrs. Coughlin reviewed, we're building a schedule for all situations because they could happen. And that's just good crisis management at this point. So whether we go in person on October 13th, we can just seamlessly go into that and still maintain our distance learning schedule within our schedule. So that was the thought behind that. I don't know if any Mr. Costa or Mrs. Coughlin wanted to add to that.
If I could, I think we, from the beginning, we, the data that came from the enrollment forms really drove some of the decisions that we could make. So that created the parameters with which we could work within. Our goal was to provide every student, whether they chose an in-person hybrid model or a distance learning model, with a quality learning experience, with opportunity for courses, whether it be an advanced math class or a STEM class or whatever their schedule would be. But those numbers really drove a lot of the decisions that we had to make. And once and the staff that we had to use in order to support those students. Once we had all of that information, then we started saying, what is the best possible model that we can provide our students in order to move their learning. Again, it's not about survival. It's not about just getting the job done. It's what can we do and what model can we develop that we can start the instruction immediately. And this is the model that we feel accomplishes that goal.
The next question from Ms. Barad-Reed, similar question, but also with the thought of why there wasn't more face-to-face with the distance and hybrid model. And I think one of the other reasons, and Mr. Mitchell has cited this at multiple school committee meetings, is that we can never go full in at this point under the current circumstances because we can't accommodate the 6 feet social distancing. So the only model that would work for in-person was a hybrid model. And then based on that hybrid model, equity came back into it for the distance learning. So that was the thinking behind that as well. But we have cited many reasons within the presentation that we believe that this is providing more of an experience than was experienced in the spring. And that is the most important part, is we really studied what took place in the spring and where we could get better. And tons of parent feedback came in and said, we need more structure. We need more time with our teachers and our children. And that's also why we made the hours change to a more normal school day. So parent feedback was important. That's how we built it. Moving on to the next question. So group A and B is divided by last name. That's like the starting point for each class list, but it's not necessarily that clean. So we're looking at the amount of students within a class and then looking at dividing them in half, and wherever that middle point is where it's happening for A group and B group. Any Mr. Costa or Mrs. Coughlin on that?
Yeah, I'll just add, at the high school, when we looked at our list for each grade, it was a clean A through K and then L through Z. So that's what we're going with in terms of an A and a B. I also want to say that if there's a question about that split, we understand that we might have siblings with different last names. Just please contact one of the administrators at any of the buildings and just discuss the situation with one of us, so to see if we can accommodate a shift if necessary. We're trying to stick to those letters because, again, we've done an analysis of those rosters to make sure we're splitting it as closely as we can for a 50-50. Again, it's about the reduction as we move from one model to another, the reduction of students by about half. It's not going to be perfect. I could say at the high school level specifically with mixed grades, mixed classes, mixed everything, I can never guarantee a 50-50 split, but we can get very close in each one of those sections.
And we had to be a little bit more creative at Northcombe Middle School in a few instances to accommodate our algebra students and our accelerated math students in distance learning. So in very few instances, we had to shift away from alphabet and more toward aligning the students with the courses that they needed. But once these schedules are released, and if there is a logistical issue that, as Mr. Costa brought up, that affects students and children in other school, we can certainly work with you. Just contact one of us.
Next question has to do with what happens when students don't have a Chromebook by Monday the 14th. I can tell you from McCourt, there'll be an email going out tomorrow about Chromebook Pickup for those 6th grade families who don't have a Chromebook at home from last year, or our transfer students for grade 7 and grade 8. As we all know, there's a issue with back orders of Chromebooks, and they'll be coming in hopefully by October. That's our target date that we've been told. And at that point, we will have a Chromebook exchange for 6th grade students and new students, which we will arrange with families. So if you haven't heard about it by tomorrow regarding pickup for Chromebooks, please contact one of us and we'll get back to you.
Mine is on Friday, and an email was sent out. So if you did not receive that, you're not aware of that, please contact me, because we are separating the day by grade level.
And at the high school, there's about 30 students, I think, who we might be waiting to pick up Chromebooks. Just contact the main office, set up a time to come and pick it up. We have people available now.
Next question is, does the hybrid start next week? And that is a yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mrs. Coughlin covered that pretty well in the presentation. And we will make the presentation and this video available from Mr. Chandler.
But I do want to jump in and make it clear that Monday, and on Monday the 14th, all students are logging in to their using their school their class schedule and logging into their classes. So Monday will be both groups following their school schedule for the entire day.
Ms. Coughlin, can I speak to that for a second? So there might be some concern right now about, all right, but we don't even know teachers, and we're waiting for that. So the plan is by tomorrow evening to have schedules go live, and this will allow teachers to look at their rosters. Teachers will be sending, at least at the high school level, I'm going to speak to the high school level first, then I'll allow Dr. Masterson or Ms. Coughlin to speak at the middle school, but teachers will then send an invitation out through Aspen to their students so they can log into those Google Meets. So please look for that starting on Friday. So if we go live tomorrow evening, teachers will be working on those things on Friday during the day.
And the same is true at the middle level. We have on Friday, teachers are used today and tomorrow, and they're organizing their rosters, and they'll be connecting with their students on Friday prior to the start of school on Monday with the information on the Google Meets. And I know it's been very difficult not receiving the information earlier, parents and students, but it will come together by Monday, and we will get the information out that students need in order to start on Monday.
Mrs. Clough, we have a question from Mr. Campbell specifically for North Carolina Middle School.
Mm-hmm.
If a student is on an IEP, will they have the opportunity to meet with teachers every day in North Cumberland?
So we will ask those those parents to contact us so that we can determine exactly what your child needs in terms of services and support. I'm not sure if Dr. Santer is on the call, but if she is not, our case managers are going to be reaching out, our special educators are going to be reaching out to their students And they're going to give them very clear direction and expectations as to how their schedule is going to be over the course of next week. So the answer is student specific.
The next question is, will students who are staying on distance learning keep the same schedule, teachers, groups of students, even the hybrid return to in-person? The answer is yes. This is why we're spending so much time building the infrastructure of the schedule so that we're ready for any situation.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this, yeah.
And a lot of all of the staff that we're utilizing are within our own building, so that the students are a part of the McCourt Middle School, North Cumberland Middle School, or Cumberland High School family.
And to expand on that, not only are they keeping the same teachers, they're within the same pods. The pods are not going to change. They're in the same class, they're in their same group. So the transition from full distance learning to in-person hybrid is extremely smooth, which is what we were hoping for.
The question is, if I chose distance learning, is the date to return in January still, or hybrid starting October? The answer is that if you chose distance learning, you chose it through January, and at that time, we believe there's going to be another opportunity to change your response for the second semester of the school year. So whether you want to, at that point, come into person or remain distance learning. There's a question about what about children with IEP needs on the days without instruction?
So if a student with an IEP is following the hybrid schedule, the special educator has been within the special ed schedule, they will also be providing support to that student with an IEP. So that has been factored into their schedule.
And I think it also depends on the level of need that a child has.
Mm-hmm.
That an IEP is just that individual. So the special education case managers obviously will be reaching out to families and working out any concerns that may be had. And there's a special education coordinator at both the middle schools and the high schools. So they are aware of all resources that are available, and as well as us as principals. So we're definitely going to be working with our students with special needs and making sure that their needs are being met.
If I could just add to that, Dr. Masson, so even in a regular in-school face-to-face setting, it's very flexible the way that a teacher and a co-teacher in a classroom at the high school, I would imagine at the middle school may work. So pulling students out or going to visit students who have been maybe moved to a small group setting, there's a flexible nature around it. So supporting students is what we need to do in those situations. And that might require teachers maybe to step out of a face-to-face and go check in with the student who might be doing independent work. But that's not atypical. That's something that we normally would do in a face-to-face setting.
And ultimately, we're looking to support students. We're looking for students to be successful. That's our goal. And one of the things that we did we did focus on is really monitoring students' progress along the way. So if a student is not successful in a certain structure and that student needs supports, we're going to bring that to the table and we're going to figure out a way to support that student.
The next question, Mrs. Clough, I believe is a facilities question.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to be done to the North Cumberland Middle School to get it ready to open October 13th or sooner? I'm assuming that's a ventilation report.
Right. Right. So, Mr. Mitchell, I don't know if you're available to just answer that question.
Good evening, everyone. All right, so first of all, I think it's important to note that extensive work has been done at both middle schools on univents. Parents may recall that a few years ago, we did a tremendous amount of work. So in addition to asbestos abatement, we also did univent work at both middle schools. So the two middle schools are probably in better shape than most of the schools under the circumstances. I think it's also important to note that all of the univents or mechanical systems in all of our buildings will be addressed in the $83 million bond referendum. But we know that we have some work to do in all of our schools on the air ventilation system in every building. And we have some teams of service techs that we're getting lined up now to get into every single classroom, assess, where we are with air exchange in each of our rooms, making the repairs that we can. And I also think it's important for everyone to know that there may be instances where we cannot get the air exchange that we need. And in that situation, the school department is in the process of purchasing 200 air purification units. These are standalone units, and we'll be able to use these units to ensure that the air is purified and cleansed of any potential virus. So, and the goal, Beth, I think Mrs. Coughlin mentioned this, the goal is to get this all done by October 13th. I mean, that's ambitious, but we are going to work really hard to try and hit that goal. So we know that ventilation is an issue. And to be honest, my guess is that most schools in the state of Rhode Island and in Massachusetts too, and probably many states across this country have similar issues with air exchange and ventilation. So I'm glad that we decided to do the study when we did about a month or so ago, and it gives us an opportunity to make the improvements that we need to ensure that number one priority of health and safety. So there's work to be done, but we're on top of it, and I'm really pleased that we're going to be able to get these air purification units to cleanse the air as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, next question is, can you address how a teacher will handle when they're out on sick day, if that sick day occurs on Friday, day 2 of Group B, with next scheduled day on Monday for all? Group A would have already received the instruction. So as administrators, we're working very closely with the Human Resources Department to cover any teachers who are going to be sick and develop those protocols, because obviously we want to be ready just in the event that any teacher is going to be out for any period of time, whether it's 1 day or 5 or 14, depending on a quarantine situation. So those are procedures we're still building internally. There's a question about live streaming. We haven't talked about live streaming publicly yet, in a sense that we're instituting it. We've had many discussions about it as a team, and that's not something we're putting in place right now. Mr. Costa, you trying to jump in?
Yeah, I do. We have voiced our desire to see if we can make live stream happen at the high school. We have talked about a schedule that allows for transition from one model or one environment to another, one that allows students to stay within their classes. So we're not pulling them out when we come back to school. And we understand that there's a realization that the best way to make that happen at the high school level is for live streaming. And so we are going through that, seeing how it can work at the high school. We're having conversations with teachers about it, hopefully to gain some support for embedding that practice so we can stay intact regardless of how we shift throughout the year.
Next question is, will students have access to music classes? Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, what we're working on right now, when we're able to parcel out those students who are interested in band. So we are working with Mr. Bowser, and we're trying to determine how best to facilitate those types of classes as well. But that was factored into the development of pods, is looking at students' ability to request to either complete a language or take part in band.
The next question is on independent days, how will attendance work and do they check in with someone? Yes, they will be expected to check in for homeroom. At McCourt, we're combining homeroom with advisory so that we can provide a good health and wellness check-in, as well as conduct some activities like the individual learning plan, which is mandated by RIDE. It's an ILP.
So at the high school level, we will use the same format that we used last year. When students were given the opportunity to fill out the Google form to kind of check in for the day on those independent days, that'll be done through the Office of Student Management. The Dean, Scott Carpenter, his office will send out that link. We will make sure students have it like they did last year. It worked very well for us, coupled with the teacher attendance for making sure that students were within the classes. So we'll utilize a similar system for that.
For middle school, we do have homeroom scheduled that students will, all students will go to homeroom to start their day off, whether they're scheduled to be with the teacher or independent learning. And then we also have Plus Block that's scheduled into student schedule. Plus Block is not going to be content specific. It's actually going to be a time where all the core teachers are available to assist students at that time. And also that's where we're going to be using that block for the ILP work and advisory work as well.
The next question, Mr. Costa, is why are lunch periods so long for CHS?
Why are lunch periods so long for CHS? So in the distant learning model, again, so the idea was when we built that schedule, we built it off of the hybrid model. So we were anticipating a return of 50-50. It didn't happen quite so soon. But what we did is that lunch block is long to give students and teachers students will have a little bit longer time, but we extended that lunchtime period for teachers, and that's where we will embed the office hour time. So those students who are independent on those opposite days, they could send messages. It just gives teachers an opportunity to do a quick check of their email to see if there are students who might need support, need questions answered very quickly so they could progress with their work. When we return, we anticipate returning in a partially, and that time will be used, that'll be the time that'll be used to give students an opportunity to get their lunch from the cafeteria. So, and we'll share how that will work with families as we get closer to that time.
The next question is there a difference in DL plans for students that are continuing with DL through the end of December? And the answer is no. The distance learning plan is a district plan, K through 12. But we have, speaking with Mr. D'Amato's office and himself personally, and we are obviously going to be reviewing it on a regular basis, probably monthly at this point, to make sure that we're achieving the goals that we've set out, and then adapt as needed. This next question is how are sixth graders getting Aspen accounts and what about Chromebooks? So your Aspen account, when you pick up a Chromebook, it will come with an agreement and all of that information, Aspen accounts, email system, that's all on there. If you had a student in 5th grade who didn't use it for some reason, you can obviously reach out to us and we'll be able to help you with that.
I think this pause is so Dr. Masson can pick the easy questions for us, right?
Yep. All right, next question is, will there be early release days? We have talked about that as an administrative team. We'll be posting that schedule. There will be early release days. We're looking at them being moved from Wednesdays to Mondays because of the amount of Mondays that are taken out of the schedule. It was just a natural place for us to be able to do that, and also allow us to continue with a hybrid schedule where all students had an equitable length of a school day.
Jay, if I could just add to that. So
Sure.
The nice thing is at the high school, when we looked at the schedule for an early release Monday, we actually were able to take some of that time from the office hours time. So the instructional time per class really didn't decrease all that much to accommodate that early release. So we were very fortunate to have that time built in.
Mr. D'Amato, we have a question that maybe you can help us with. The question is, can parents get access to the curriculum through the first 30 days of distance learning? I thought I saw him come on.
Yeah, he's right here. He'll be right in.
Okay.
So sorry about that. Mike had to let me into the meeting, so I apologize.
Well, I don't know why he left you out.
He was doing me a favor, I think. But so can parents have access to the curriculum? That's the question, Jay?
So I'll repeat it. Can parents get access to the curriculum through the first 30 days of distance learning?
Well, right now, our curriculum can be, we can give you the websites, we can provide websites as to the general programs that we use, but the public and the parent community has to understand that we are a data responsive district, and our programs that we call quote unquote our curriculum is just a framework, and we alter that framework and adjust our instruction and our what we call curriculum maps based on the information that we get, dips in grade 3 level performance, for example. So we beef up certain standards and instruction. So our curriculum is actually quite dynamic. It's not a static document, but what we can provide is the general websites for Engage New York Math, say, for K through 8. At the high school level, as you know, that's mainly content driven. And those types of, that type of information or content information, scope and sequence would probably need to be asked directly to the actual content teachers, I would imagine. Is that correct, Mr. Costa?
Yeah, and to support what you're saying too about that curriculum, kind of the framework for it, even now, you know, we're going into this teachers, all of us, I'm not just teachers, but we're all just finding out kind of what schooling is going to look like. So there are some revisions taking place to accommodate what the structures for school are going to be. So I think the best bet is I know that the teachers across the district do a really good job communicating prior to learning for students. And I think that might be a better way to go, maybe on a week or a bi-weekly basis, that these are the types of things that we will be teaching our students, and these are the type of activities we're hoping to see our students participate in, kind of drive the communication that way rather than here is the curriculum for this particular course. Because even as a building leader, I would anticipate some modifications just to fit the structures of our current school environment.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Costa, and I think just to add to that, the beauty of what we're doing right now is we're, again, digging into the curriculum, digging into how we facilitate instruction and how we progress monitor our students. So we're constantly evolving. And I think Mr. D'Amato did a nice job of articulating that's how we're not, if we were to look at our curriculum on paper and apply it to this model, there would be a question of, can we get through the curriculum? But that's not how we're looking at it. We're looking at where standards are being taught, how they're being taught, and what's the most efficient and effective manner of providing that instruction to our students. So not only are we looking different, we're also looking to be better. So that model of looking at the data and constantly evolving is something that as a school community we're always doing.
Yeah, one last thing, if you don't mind, Dr. Masterson. The second, if we were to publish, say, a grade 3 document, within 3 to 4 weeks after mapping sessions happen, that document would no longer be, it would be old. And so what we're trying to think about is a system where as we update maps, what could we put out that's parent friendly? And that's a work in progress.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Costa, I got an easy one. What's the start and end day for the high school? Time.
The time, first class meets at 7:15 and will run to 1:55. That is the regular schedule.
Next question is, when will students get their schedules with teachers' names on it? And as Mr. Costa said earlier, we're working on our schedule. I'm working personally on it right now. I'm trying to get it done because I know he's ready to get it out, and we're holding him up. So we're looking for tomorrow night, but definitely by Friday.
We still have some work to do too, Dr. Masterson.
Oh, man.
We all do.
There's questions about A and B groups. There is designations within Aspen for students to be in an A group or a B group. So once the students look at their schedule, they should be able to see that. If not, definitely reach out and we'll be able to help with that.
We went so far as to also designate students whose parents already made a decision to keep their students in distant learning once we return. So it was actually an additional choice. So we just call that team D, but they will be divided with the hybrid, the A and the B, according to the last name of their alphabet. But then we've already made arrangements to know. If you see something like that on a schedule and it's incorrect, just please contact us so we can just note that differently in Aspen.
Additionally, teachers are going to be reaching out to students as well. And once they give them their Google Classroom, all that information will be available.
And just a reminder, there's a question. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted. There's a question about will there be enhanced communication with parents on students completing work. In the spring, it was difficult to know if my student was completing assignments and participating in class. I can tell you at McCourt, communication is one of our major initiatives for this school year based on what we learned in the spring. And the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee is working on a communication protocol that starts with my role at the principal level, and then my communication with our staff and communication with staff and students and staff and families. So that is definitely some places that we're trying to greatly increase and make it more efficient.
Also, part of the streamlining of Google Classroom is to have that be a place where parents can look and just to see where the child stand in terms of completing tasks. So we are going to be staff at the middle level. I don't want to speak for the high school. When they assign an assignment on Google Classroom, it will be posted in a way that a student must submit that assignment to earn credit. They must click submit. So that way, when a parent either looks at the report they receive or looks at their child's student's classroom, it'll be very clear as to what the child has completed and what the child owes. So that's going to be one improvement from last year.
Yeah, the elementary, I think the elementary and the middle schools had, maybe the elementaries had created or had developed this list of expectations that kind of enhanced how we would educate this fall. And it was a list of things, and high school adopted that. And I know that one of the things that we are concentrating on is communication. And now that things are more clear, I would say that the families, students, our whole community should anticipate more and better communication. It's been a difficult road to get to this point. But now that we know how school will open, we can feel more comfortable in the information that we'll provide to our community.
And one of the other features that we're also promoting at McCourt is the Google Classroom summary that goes home weekly to your email. So that's a nice feature that some families had access to last year because they asked for it. And so we're looking to do that more universally this year. There's a question about, please explain the difference between day 29 and 31. Will students be going into school after day 30, and how will instruction change? And I think that all depends a lot on where we are with the pandemic as well as our air report. So the 30 days is a target, and we're going to be monitoring that each week. I know Mr. Mitchell talked about that earlier on with his intro.
In terms of instruction, you know, as the reason at the middle level, we are separating our distance learning students from our in-person hybrid students and created the pods that way is so that when they transition into separate learning models, one teacher was scheduled with 3 sections of in-person, 1 section of distance learning. So the amount of instructional time and the planning of the instruction is not going to change, and the teacher is able to focus in on the students are in her class, the 15 or less students that are in his or her class, and then for the distance learning class that's in the teacher's schedule, that becomes the teacher's focus at that time. So I don't anticipate that instructionally there will be much of a shift. You know, the model in which they're teaching will change. There will be now students in front of the teacher, but in terms of the content and the pacing, we're looking and hoping for alignment, which is why we did what we did.
Mr. Mitchell, the next 2 questions I think are best handled at this point by you. The first question is approximately what percentage of students have chosen distance learning until January?
I think,
Actually,
I was just going to say, initially it was around 30% that chose distance learning. And then I know that there were, so half the families chose in-person learning, 30% initially chose distance learning, and there were 20% that were waiting for the governor's press conference on August 31st. Since not only the governor's press conference on the 31st, but also since the last school committee meeting, a number of parents have decided that they want to send their children to school. I don't know what the exact percentage is. I mean, if I had to make a guess, I would say probably around 60% now. Does that sound about right? Do you think?
I just, I looked at that actually very quickly, and for Northcombe Middle School, if this is any indication of the rest of the schools, grade 6, we had 24% of our students distance learning, grade 7, 25%, and grade 8, 21%. Now that was down from where the data was originally, which was closer to 30% and above initially, with obviously those families who were waiting for the governor's decision. But after the last town hall meeting, there were a number of families who did change their decision from distance learning to in-person learning.
I think that number, I think at the high school, that number is hovering right now around 22 or 23% of our students, and that's school-wide.
And we're about 30 on McCourt. Mr. Mitchell, there's a question about how busing will work once we go into hybrid.
We have been in constant communication with the bus company, and as I've mentioned in several of our school committee meetings, the change to the transportation policy where, we're asking that the policy be followed. Students living within those walking distances are expected to either walk or get transportation from a parent. And we've also asked parents to consider carpooling under the circumstances. But between the number of students that are choosing distance learning and the enforcement, if you will, of the transportation policy, the expectation is that we're going to be able to safely, socially distance all students on the bus. So we'll be paying close attention to that. As I mentioned, we meet every Wednesday. In fact, we had our weekly meeting this morning. We're in constant communication with them. And if we have to adjust for any reason, then we will do that. So we'll be in constant communication with families about where we are with the number of students on our buses.
Thank you. Will after-school activities clubs be available this year in person or in Zoom? I think right now we're looking at the availability of virtual clubs. We are really trying to make sure that we get every classroom cleaned every night. So the in-person one would be a hard one to pull off unless it was outside. Those are possibilities, but they would have to be brought up by an advisor / teacher, staff member to us as administrators so we can work with them on how to do that correctly in this current situation we're in.
Yeah, and I would say that we have time for those decisions to be made. I think right now we've been solely focused on getting students back to school, however school looks like, and potentially there might be an avenue to offer some of those programs. We want to make sure that we do it in the most safest environment possible, and it should be given lots of focus. But right now we're just focused on opening up school.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but we do know the importance of providing our kids the opportunity to have some social interaction, even virtually. So we will certainly be looking to provide that.
Next question is, what role can parents play to fortify education, assistance, et cetera, to offset less hours with teachers and frankly be good partners with teachers? So I can tell you that the parents that have been working with us at our school have been excellent partners in providing us really upfront feedback on the spring in ways that we can really improve from the service we provided in the spring. And, you know, I've been doing weekly open office hours for parents, and I really appreciate the fact that, you know, parents are coming with great questions and also providing feedback. So please don't be a stranger for how we can always improve, but also to be in contact with your child and your child's teacher and ask questions when you have them. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I agree. I would also say have them wake up on time for class. That would be really helpful. And also, you know, give us the feedback. If something is working, then let us know. If something's not working, then let us know. The increase in instructional time in this year's model was to reduce the reliance on parents having to be in the role of teacher. We want teachers to really take on the brunt of the instruction, and then you know, parents to help us with student engagement, with student accountability, and providing us with the feedback to either continue what we're doing because it's working or make an adjustment because it's not. So I think that's extremely important. We're gonna be providing lots of opportunities for parents to offer their feedback over the course of the year. So if you could get involved with that, that would be great.
All right, next question is, are you basing numbers of in-person from survey that was done a while back, or was there a more recent one in last week or so? And how do we make sure our child's on the correct list? I would just say reach out to your administrator if you have a question about that. I know that I received a few confirming emails, no problem. But there was a commitment email that went out from the district about 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and it was asked that you made a commitment by this past Friday after the school committee meeting if you were waiting for the governor's decision.
And if you receive a schedule that's not accurate, and just make sure you notify us right away so that we can make those adjustments sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, we're updating that. So we've had some parents sent us some emails, and I have a designated person. So whoever that email is sent to, whether it's sent to me or whether it's sent to one of the building secretaries, they forward that to the person. And we have a designated person who's updating that list constantly.
Question, what will art, music, and phys ed classes look like? Obviously right now they're distance learning. We did have our staff look at the way they provided instruction in the spring, and they've made some great improvements and have also gone on professional development on their own to really try to hone their craft and provide access to those classes for your children. The phys ed classes will continue to, once we go into school, phys ed classes will be happening. Art and music, and we have STEM in the middle schools, will be going into your child's pod to limit movement amongst the building. School counseling question. School counselors just started over the past couple of days. They're off in the summer, they're on a teacher schedule. So I'm sure that they're going to be looking at all the emails they received and getting back to you in a timely manner.
Jay, what was the question?
I'm sorry. Have all the school counselors been hired back?
Oh, okay.
They sent an email a couple of weeks ago and haven't received a response yet.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
But as a reminder, there was, the 2 middle schools are working with 1 full-time counselor at each middle school, and then 1 counselor that is split between the 2 schools. So, so we are working toward, getting back to all of our parents and providing them with the information they need. If for some reason an email goes unanswered, but feel free to email one of us and let us know, and we can certainly direct it, put it in the right direction or answer your question for you.
I'd also like to add that when you hear, you hear us talking about we're trying to finalize schedules so we can make them available to parents. We're at least at the high school, I'm telling you, that's a lot of work that we're asking our school counselors to do right now in a very, very short window of time. So I would just ask that you be a little patient with them. They will get back to you. They will make sure that your needs are heard, but they are up against the clock, just like we're up against the class, so we can get that important information to you, to our teachers, so they could start communicating with their students.
The next question, the students who are doing virtual learning through January, are they doing Ingenuity, or they will be involved in this process? And are there 2 separate models? At the middle level, we're teaching our curriculum. The district curriculum is being taught. We are not using Ingenuity as a base curriculum. Mr. Costa.
Yeah, thank you. So at the high school, it is our full intent to do the same thing that is happening at our middle schools, where students are not removed from their courses. They stay embedded in their courses, regardless of the model, with the same teacher, with the same classmates. They may see them on a screen, they may see them in person, but that is our intent. We are still working on a few final details that we are confident we're going to get accomplished that we'll be able to do that. Ingenuity at the high school has been used for many, many years. I don't want people to believe that this is something new that we're jumping into. Many of our students benefit from that program, but we understand that's not for everyone. And we're very careful of how we enroll students in those courses. And we're hoping not to make that, not only am I not hoping, I'm very, very confident that that will not become the default platform for our distant learning students. I have all the faith that they will be with the same teachers that they will start with on Monday.
All right, next question is, how frequently will there be breaks for middle school students on those full days of classes? Is there actually 6 or 7 blocks of classes on those days? Mrs. Coughlin, you want to take it?
Sure. As in our distance learning, full distance learning model, we put in 10-minute breaks between classes and a 30-minute lunch period, but we extended that to 40 minutes just to get kids back into class. So we understand that after sitting in front of a screen for 15 minutes, a break is needed. So that's built into the class schedule. When students are in person, the class schedule obviously will be the same for both in-person and distance learning. And, as there will not be movement within the classroom for in-person. Once we have the in-person model, our our pods are stable. They're going to be in the same classroom all day, and they're obviously going to be providing an extremely safe environment, but also giving the students the breaks they need over the course of the day to stay engaged.
And just to add to that, there are 6 blocks in a student's schedule a day in the middle school, including homeroom. So that technically is 7, but and we at McCourt, we're doing 5-minute breaks between periods because we have the advisory period taking place during homeroom. There's a question here. With this model, will students still get the same instructional time as full in-person, and will all the standards be taught this year? And I can say to Mrs. Weber that the standards are taught over time, multiple times. They're addressed multiple times throughout the year. And that's how we also measure our students' growth, especially ELA, social studies, and science. Math is more of a learn in the moment and move on, kind of a standards-based instruction. So there will be multiple opportunities to address that standard.
Our goal is to provide a comprehensive grade level learning experience. So, how that evolves over the course of the year based on what this school year brings us will force us and challenge us to adapt as needed. So the goal still remains a comprehensive grade level learning experience for all students, and then, but certainly adapt as needed.
Yeah, Mr. Costa, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I just want to say that across the whole district, there's been so many people involved with really revising curriculum to be more focused on these standards that really impact student growth. And this environment doesn't change that. Our teachers across the district really do understand these are the critical things that our students need to learn. And so we're going to be focused on these. And I anticipate still being depth in which we instruct our students, measuring their progress along the way. So those good teaching practices will happen. Might they look different? Yes, because the environment looks different, but they'll still be embedded in the everyday practices.
Mrs. Coffin, this seems like a North Cumberland question. We chose distance learning and our child is new to middle school and is in Strive. As I understand, their schedule is different.
So what was the question, Dr. Masterson?
We chose distance learning and our child is new to middle school and is in Strive. As I understand, their schedule is different.
Yes, but that also our teachers who are in charge of that program are reaching out to the families, and they're going to provide an extremely supportive transition to middle school. So they are already working on it. They are going to be reaching out to their students, and they're going to be giving them all the support and information they need in order to start the school year. And as I said earlier, programs and students' needs will determine schedule. So our 2 teachers, Ms. Romano and Mrs. Stenovich, are going to provide the students in their program the information that in terms of how often they will be attending school and when and so forth.
Next question is, will attendance still be taken for each class period? And the answer is that yes. And our teachers are going to be conducting roll call attendance. And it also will be recorded in Aspen.
Yes, and I just want to add something, one more piece of information to that parent who asked that question about the STRIVE program. Anyone, whether you, if you're new to the school and you have specific questions, please contact me directly so that we can, we can give you the specific information that you need for your child. So, I'm sorry, Dr. Matheson, to interrupt.
Not a problem. Question here, what is the plan to address the loss of learning and gaps that most certainly occurred in the spring and will continue this fall with the students of Cumberland?
So we have obviously we benchmark and our students at the beginning of the year to determine where they are in their learning and where do we go from there. So that happens in ELA and in math. But also we're progress monitoring students in all content areas. From there, students who are identified with gaps, we have embedded what we call our essentials program. So if we see a student is in need of significant support based on learning loss, then we will provide that student with the support they need. If we find that, generally speaking, a teacher is working on a learning task in which the students aren't quite where they need to be in order to start that particular piece of learning, then the teacher needs to revise how their instruction or their lesson in order to support the students and maybe providing a better foundation before moving forward. So it's going to be a lot of measuring, observing, feedback, collecting information, collecting data, and then making instructional decisions.
Mr. Costa.
Yeah, if I could just add to that too, I think it'll be important for our teachers as they're coming into fall of 2020 is really to measure where their students are. And while in a typical year, I might be starting out and, I think specifically to those content areas that are heavily in skill. We need to measure where students are. And maybe this is not the year. If last year I started day one with a particular lesson, this year, I might have to go back a little bit and start maybe with something that would have supported kids toward the end of last year. So to fill in that gap. We don't want to just progress without filling it in, because then as we move forward, that gap can get further pronounced. So I think it'll be important for us to use some assessment strategies to determine quickly how far back we might need to go back and just teach a little bit in order to fill in some of those gaps. And again, the district has done just an absolutely amazing job in providing resources in terms of some tier 2 and tier 3 interventions for all of our students to support them. So if we do find that some students need supports, and I would say this is true at any level, we'll provide them those supports so we can quickly ramp them up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just to add to that, Mr. Costas, when we talk about resources that have been added, the essentials programs at the middle level and high school are key in addressing some of those learning gaps that you asked about. And that investment was made by Mr. DeMont and his office and his vision. So we've really amped up our support for our students. And this year will be no different. If anything, it'll be more intense. Next question was, how large are in-person class sizes when we transition to a hybrid model? And are we able to keep stable pods at lunch? So I'll take the average class size. Our class size limits in Cumberland are 26. So if we maxed out every single class, then we would have approximately 13 in every classroom in the hybrid model. And at the middle level, I can only speak to the middle level, we are setting up lunches for stable pods.
Yeah, absolutely. And by doing an alternating schedule and having half the number of students in, we're able to comfortably house students in their stable pods with the recommended CDC 6-foot distance between students. So we're in good shape.
Yeah, at the high school level, when it comes to that division or the number of students in an in-person setting, please keep in mind that we have approximately 600 different sections that students can be enrolled in. So we haven't looked at each one of those sections, but what Dr. Masterson said is pretty accurate, where if you just take that number 26 divided in half, you're probably looking at a margin of error of 1 or 2 kids on either side of that in an in-person setting. We've looked at classrooms and we feel comfortable with 15 to 16 in most of our classes. So we think it'll be fine at the high school. At the lunches at Cumberland High School, they pose a larger challenge. you know, it's a large cafeteria, but we also house a large number of students in each one of our lunches. So what we've dedicated that space for is for classroom environments that might not be conducive for students to eat lunch in. I'll give you a concrete example of that. There might be 3 PE classes going on at the same time. That's approximately 75 students. And I would not ask a student to have lunch in a gym. So they would need, so we're talking about initially there alone, 75 kids needing access to the cafeteria. So those are the types of strategies we're utilizing to make sure kids have a comfortable place to have lunch.
Mr. Costa, there's been a couple of questions regarding chorus at the high school and how that was, what the plan is for that.
So again, the chorus room at the high school is a very, very large room. Kids can be separated even upwards of 12 to 15 feet, especially in a hybrid model where we only have 50% of our students. Also last year, I think both Mr. Ferrocci and Ms. Santer did a great job with band and chorus in a distant learning model, just to try to keep students engaged in that program. So I would anticipate we will have some success again. Tonight, I really wanted to be focused on the first 25, 30 days, the distant learning, but just to give people, you know, some peace of mind when students come back. And I know a lot of the community has seen the building, both the band room and the chorus room, a very, very large room, one that easily allows for social distancing of students, even at greater spaces that would be recommended, and something that obviously we need to encourage, only because we are talking about kids singing and blowing into instruments. So there could be an added risk there if we don't socially distance even further. And then just to add, there's always going outside. I think programs like that where they might not necessarily need to get a desk outside, there's that opportunity to do things outside as well in a safe way.
Mr. Chandler, we have a question for you. For high school, will we receive notification to re-enroll for the Chromebook insurance?
Yes, we will. Those will be going out this week. You'll have an opportunity to get those payments back to the school and then get that process rolling.
Thank you. Do we have a couple of hands raised, Mr. Chandler?
Well, we do. We have 2 people.
Okay, so let me do a few more and then we can maybe switch it up a bit.
Sure.
Mr. Mitchell, this might be a question for you. It says, what is the process for teacher evaluation during the distance and hybrid phases? This is not meant to be punitive, but rather knowing that teachers will need support. It'll be helpful for school administration to have a good handle on where strengths and weaknesses fall in regards to virtual teaching, so its support can be provided. There's been a push to skip evaluations in other districts, and she's just wondering where Cumberland stands.
I know that. Go ahead, Tony, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Bob, if you want me to answer that, I can.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so just really quickly, teacher evaluation, we discussed it as an administration team, and we were discussing how we were going to implement the current state model and how we were going to adapt the state model to the current conditions, albeit a hybrid model. How do we evaluate, you know, teachers that are teaching online? And we came up with, I think, some innovative ways of doing that. We shared that information with all of the principals, and the principals were going to outline all of those parameters specifically with their staff, so they're all on the same page. So it's part of their orientation process, and or shortly thereafter, if not part of the next few days, teachers will be receiving that information and those expectations from the administration team.
Thank you, Mr. D'Amato. This question, will school counselors be available for calls and questions? Absolutely. They're in now, so you're able to call the school and get those answers that you need. There's a question about, just a clarification from me. Chromebooks, will North Cumberland students be getting Chromebooks grade 6, whereas McCourt students won't? Nope, we're both on the same system. I just haven't sent out my email yet. Mrs. Coughlin beat me to it. My email is going out tomorrow. working with the IT department.
Want to take some questions, Dr. Masterson?
Sure. Yeah, I'm scrolling through to make sure there's no new ones here. Mr. Chandler, feel free.
So I have Cooper has their hand raised. You'd like to speak?
Hello.
No, we'll give him a second. We have a Brooks would like to speak.
Can you
Brooks,
hear
if
me?
you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Costa, this is for you. Are all the advanced classes and AP classes in the high school still going to be available?
It is my anticipation, yes, all of those courses, our whole program of studies that was set into Aspen. Now, I will say this, in January, we have to make some decisions based on enrollment. So for example, if an AP course only had 4 students sign up for it, we wouldn't run it. But once it's built, we have not, at this present moment, we have not eliminated any courses from the original build based on any model that we're returning to school on. So
Okay, so
all of those
my child's courses that he picked for this year should be in place on his schedule then.
should be in place on his schedule. There's a couple of things that happen that's out of our control. Is
I
there a fit?
understand. Yes, I do understand.
Yeah,
And
if
Dr.
there's
Costa,
2,
thank you.
all
for
right,
all the
thank you.
work thank you for all the work that you do. It's great.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have a Arjun. They have dropped out. At this time, I don't have anybody left with their hands up. If somebody would like,
While you're here, Mr. Chandler, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What arrangements are being made to help all families have access to the internet, similar to hotspots in the spring?
so if there are any families that do need internet, we do have hotspots. We have a number of families that are still using the hotspots that we used and passed out this past spring. So if somebody does need it, just reach out to the building principal and we can help them. I have some other people now that are starting to raise their hands, bring in
Yep,
some
feel free.
questions.
Go ahead.
Of Elise Skirker.
Yeah, hey everyone. This is actually your husband, Craig. So you guys talked a lot about the plan for the next 4 weeks of distance learning and how we convert to the hybrid model. What's the timeline for the full in-person model per the governor's direction? Or what's the timeline that Cumberland sees right now? Maybe this is a question for Mr. Mitchell.
I can start for you, Mr. Mitchell, but the governor's full in model actually provides the opportunities for secondary schools to be in a hybrid setup. So the hybrid setup is an acceptable full model based on the governor's original executive order. And as long as we have to maintain a 6-foot distancing and there's no vaccine, the hybrid model will be the one that we would foresee being the future until there's a change in the pandemic. And I'm not sure if Mr. Mitchell has anything to add to that or.
You know, I think you answered it well. And I think the thing that we are all hoping for is that we can get back to normal as quickly as possible. We want everybody to be back just, you know, like we would in the normal opening of school. And so we're hopeful that at some point over the course of this school year, we'll be able to get everybody back. That's the goal. So as you know, the governor has these very specific metrics that have to be met. And, you know, there's more and more talk about, you know, a vaccine. So hopefully right around the first of the year, maybe we'll be in a better position. But, you know, we'll be ready to make that transition if need be. So we're hopeful that it'll be sooner rather than later.
we're basically punting on going back prior to January 1st unless there's a vaccine. Like we're not coming up with a plan of how we could do this unless there's a vaccine prior to that, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I don't know that we would go back, without, getting the, support of the governor, of course. So, we're in a position where, we're ready to go back at any time because, that's what we want. We want to be as normal as possible. So, we certainly don't want to be in a position where we're making decisions that are contrary to, what we're getting from the state. So, I guess I know that the goal has always been to, get the elementary school students back first. I think that is the priority. And I think the governor has mentioned that from day one. As you can imagine, and the middle schools have done a great job of creating stable groups of students so that they can get, students back, as close to normal as possible. The high school is virtually impossible given the sheer volume of students that are there every day, 1,500 students, and all of the transitions that happen over the course of the day. It's really difficult. So, believe me, I know that I'm speaking for everyone, including parents, when we say that we want to get back to school as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you.
We have a Ryan Mocott.
All right, thanks for taking my question, first of all. I've got actually several things. So on independent learning days, are students expected to log on to their class at the start of each period? Also, how many hours of independent work will be expected on those days? And will there be other independent homework assigned on all days, I guess is one. And then I was trying to find out how the busing is going to work and stuff like that, or I guess maybe we'll find out more about that at a later time. But anyways, maybe you can address the independent learning days. Over.
Yeah, I'll start. So we've had conversations with our teachers today, in fact, about that specific thing where we're asking them to limit the minutes that a student might be on task on an independent day, equivalent to what maybe a class period would be. We cannot request that teachers not give homework though, because the sheer nature of some of the courses that students take at Cumberland High School, for example, there was an earlier question about AP courses. Those curriculums will progress and there'll be some additional work that we might ask students to do. That might be also true in a honors course in social studies or in an advanced math class or in other classes too. And we're not looking to inundate students with a ton of work on their independent day, but there's an expectation that they're keeping up with the curriculum. And then again, on that independent day, one thing we know is true, that they don't have direct access to their teacher in the moment. So we need to make that accommodation as well. But I just want to assure you that those conversations are happening. So students are being treated fairly, but at the same time, teachers are getting the best from their students.
Okay, so just so I understand, so those days, they don't necessarily check in for their class periods, but it's kind of look at what I've got from all my teachers to keep me busy throughout the day. And is there an expectation that at least 5 hours out of the day for, I guess I've got a son in the middle school, so is there expectation that maybe they'd be working for 5 hours on different things and the teacher would be checking that over?
Yeah, so I'm just, since you have a son in the middle school, I'm just going to finish my response and allow them to respond, and Dr. Masson or Ms. Coughlin to respond to that. But I would say that at the high school, kids are enrolled in 7 courses. It's about 40 minutes per course, so do the math. That's what you should expect your child, the amount of work to do in that independent day. Go ahead, guys.
So at the middle level, yes, there will be work to be done that will very likely take up quite a bit of the following day. The structure of the middle school is still in teams, so that we have 4 core teachers who will be having conversations with one another, so that we understand the amount of work students are expected to complete on their independent task day, and that expectation is to be reasonable. A school day, having a learning task due for each of their core content areas is something that we would expect a student to accomplish on their independent task day. Now, having said that, that's part of the feedback that we're going to be looking for students to provide us, as well as staff, so that we can find what is the balance that provides a productive, not busy work, a productive learning day for students, but in an independent manner. So that's going to evolve, but yes, the expectation is that there will be assignment from each of the classes, and it will take a good part of the day in order to complete that task, and that the student complete the task for the next instructional day, unless otherwise told differently by the teacher. Does that answer your question, Mr. Marcotte?
It does. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have Ellie Cruz. We'll move on to Amy Dwyer.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I have a quick question. Just wanted to clarify, especially specific to the middle school, in particular North Cumberland. If a student is starting with distance learning for the entire semester 1, but then if we decide for him to return to in-person for semester 2, I just wanted to clarify, will they remain with the same pod and the same teacher for semester 2?
So that's a situation that is a little bit different. If a student had chosen distance learning, they were scheduled in a distance learning pod, that will remain distance learning. So we have in-person pods developed, and we have distance learning pods developed. So if the school determines that, in January, if it is determined that students return, let's say all students are returning, maybe we're maintaining a hybrid situation, but the students are returning after the January semester, those pods would remain intact. If it becomes an individual choice, there has to be some adjustments in schedule, because that way I would still have distance learning students in pods who would continue with distance learning, and then students who perhaps have to be adjusted to or changed to an in-person pod.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Next question for Mr. Mitchell. The E&E report, it was asked at the school committee meeting to rerun the room analysis to accommodate for the hybrid model. So there was a question about an update on that result.
That's a good question. We actually had a conversation with Paul Murphy, the engineer that led the study this morning, and we asked that very question. He is in the process of rerunning the data so that we can get a better assessment of whether rooms, as you may know, rooms have been identified either green, which means they are ready to go for students, or red, which means we have some work to do. So he is working on that report, and I expect that we'll get it tomorrow. I think the good news is we'll have more rooms, given the fact that there are fewer students right now. We'll have more rooms that will be safe for students and staff to return.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
have another hand up if you'd like to take that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Looks like Ryan Marcotte.
Sorry, can you hear me okay, first of all? Okay, great. Just thought of something else. I know somebody else asked a question, I guess, and I think it was answered for the other middle school, but for North Cumberland Middle School, is there thoughts of putting cameras or a teacher with an iPad that they can do a Google Meet type video and that live stream that you could have class 5 days a week so that students aren't missing out? Over. That's it.
Dr. Masterson did answer for the 2 middle schools because we are working collaboratively to plan our instructional model for distance learning. We are not at the point where we are live streaming classes. We scheduled our distance learning students into pods, their own pods that are separate from the in-person pods. That is not to say that as we evolve in our ability to provide virtual instruction, we don't start moving in a different area that will maybe involve some type of, live streaming. If that's the direction we move into, we'll look at that. But right now we're not looking to live stream classes. We're looking to use the Google Meet as our instructional platform to start the year off with, and then determine how we can evolve from there.
Mr. Costa, I have a question for you. Are pathways still happening at CHS during the distance learning hybrid time?
So yeah, during the distance learning time, all of the courses that are aligned to any of the pathways are happening. If you have any questions about how the pathways will work, because there are other components to being in a pathways program, I would encourage you to reach out to Heather Delfino, the assistant principal who's in charge of pathways. She will get back to you very, very quickly about any question you may have. But as of this moment, all of those courses that align to completing a pathway are running as scheduled.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions regarding technology. If you have a personal computer at home, whether it's Chromebook or iPad, the question is, can you use that at home to do school? And the answer is yes. When you move into a hybrid situation for in-person learning, you will not be able to bring in your own device. You would have to use a school-issued Chromebook. Are there any more hands, Mr. Chandler, while I'm scrolling?
Yeah, we have Julie Passy.
Hi guys, you are awesome, first of all. And I know this has been asked in like different ways up until this point, but I just want some reassurance, I guess. When we're back in person, hopefully by the 13th, and the people that are in class are in class, the people that are at home, is your goal to, when they're at home, to live stream so that they can see what's going on in the classroom? Thank you.
So at the middle level, the teacher, it's not going to change at all from how they were working in the distance learning environment. So the teacher is only working with the distance learning kids during their scheduled class time. So there's not going to be students in there. Now the teacher in the Google Meet will be having that same instructional interaction as she did with the students who are in person, but she's doing, or he or she is doing that, that lesson with only the distance learning students. There's not a mixture of distance learning and in-person learning students in the same pod. So he or she, the teacher, is scheduled to have certain classes that are in person and then one class that is 100% distance learning students. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what your answer is your answer. You know, my brother is a math teacher at a university, and I know university is different from high school level.
Mhm.
He's able to do both at the same time. So he has given instruction to 10 students while 10 other students are listening live stream online, and it's going really well. And
Yeah. I think one of the differences that we that we notice at the middle level, and it's a different answer at the high school level, I will tell you that. But at the middle level, one of the things that we are very concerned about is making sure that we're providing the students with real-time support as needed. And the teachers, and I agree, feel that would be difficult if we had a combination of in-person and distance learning students at the same time. So that's why we want to make sure that we're focusing in on the cohort of students and the platform that they're in. So it's a similar platform so that students can receive the support they need rather than having the teacher work with the students who are in front of them, leaving the cohort of students or the students who are online without the support.
right.
So,
And I was just going to say, I appreciate your answer. I'm more interested in the high school, Mr.
Oh, okay. I'll be quiet then.
No, I do appreciate your answer. And you guys are awesome. I totally think you're awesome. I just,
If your child was in middle school.
in high school, I think they're more mature and they can handle something more like what I was saying.
Yeah, so I would say that the majority of our students can be more independent learners and take on that responsibility. But I think there's been this ongoing theme that we really need to develop systems that work for all of our students. So to answer your question, is the goal to also live stream so students at home can see lessons going on? That answer for me, the goal is absolutely yes. I hope to get that in place before we come back to an in-person setting, whatever that in-person setting is. But we would still maintain this A-B type of rotation for students because we'd want to reduce the number. Now we're reducing the number of students live in front of the teacher, and we want to reduce the number of students that are at home, maybe through a Google Meet. So, but yes, the idea is we want students to be able to see their teachers deliver the lesson.
Okay. Thank you.
Just have a good, interesting question. If a selection for Mr. Stevenson, if a selection was not made for distance learning or in-person, is it assumed a student will default to in-person and not distance learning? The answer is no. We need every family to make a choice. So I know that we have been calling families over the last 3 days. We've been emailing because we do need a choice. This isn't something that we're going to be defaulting anything on.
Dr. Masterson?
Mr. Mitchell.
I just want to jump in here. I think we should set an end time for this forum, if folks don't mind, for 8:30. So that'll give us about another 10 minutes or so. I hope everyone in the audience knows that, you know, this was our first day back with teachers, and it has been incredibly busy for all of us, as you can imagine. We know that you all have more questions, and we have the questions that we can respond to if we don't get a chance to answer them today. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we'll answer as many questions as we can in the next 10 minutes, and whatever we don't get to, we'll do what we can to answer those that we're not able to get to this evening. Thank you, Dr. Masterson.
Anytime. Mr. Costa, question about SATs. Will they be in school?
So as of right now, we have not heard from either the state or from College Board, which is the organization that runs the SAT, that there's been any change in schedule. The plan at the high school is when the time comes to deliver the PSAT 9 to 9th graders, PSAT 10 to 10th graders, the SAT, the NMSQT, PSAT, and then the SAT the 11th. And this year, RIDE is also offering the SAT to 12th graders who didn't get an opportunity to take it last year. we want to schedule something in the building and only have those students participating in that assessment come to the building to take the assessment. There has been no change in that schedule, again, at the state level, and we haven't heard anything different from College Board. So right now, October 14th is the first scheduled assessment, which is a very difficult day for us if we target the 13th as the first day students are back. But we are preparing for that assessment.
Thank you. Mrs. DiGiovanni has a question. When in the in-person hybrid model, will lockers be used? In the middle schools, they will not be. I don't know, Mr. Costa, about the high school.
We only issue about 20% of our lockers to our student body. Each year we allow students to make a selection where they are. So for us, separating lockers among the building so students are distancing from one another is not an issue. So it's something that if it was really needed, and especially coming back in an in-person model, and if athletics are going on, kids are carrying around a lot of equipment. We don't want to take the ability away from students to store things.
And they are not going to be used at North Cumberland Middle School. Students in person will keep their belongings in the classroom because they're there for the day.
Mr. Costa, a question about movement within the high school. So how will students get to their next classes while trying to maintain 6-foot distance?
So currently at the high school, one of the things that we've done, Mr. Carpenter, our dean, has been working on establishing, with help from the assistant principals, we've been establishing one-way hallways, one-way stairwells, making sure that things are marked clearly for students. Mr. Mitchell did say earlier that at the high school, we just can't get around students moving around, and even a staggered release among students when they leave one class, and if there's 25, and let's say in a hybrid model, there's 15 kids in that class, they could all very well be going to a different setting. So we're going to have to educate our students carefully. We're going to have to expect them to be responsible. We're going to have to reteach some expectations. But we are planning for that circulation of students, but I want the community to understand there will be circulation of students. There's no way around that.
Next question is, what is the plan for snow days? So with distance learning, we would just keep running with the way we're running now with distance learning. Mr. Mitchell, I don't think there's anything different you would have to add to that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. One thing that distance learning has done, it certainly has prepared us for those kinds of any kind of an emergency where we're not able to get students to school. So yeah, I think the intent is to use distance learning on those days.
Mr. Acosta, a question about, will you be using the catwalk?
Yes, we will still be using the catwalk, but the added feature is that, and this has been brought up in a couple of different meetings, as we think it'll be important to consider as students are coming back, to allow them to walk outside between the transitional building and the high school. If we go that route, and I think it'll be important for us to go that route, I just want to put that out there. We're making plans for supervision between classes when the bulk of our students are transitioning from one setting to another. When it's during a class and a student has been called from one location to another, and we have fewer students in the hallway, students will be asked to use the catwalk. But during that transition time, we'll make arrangements to have supervision out between the buildings so students can freely walk outside in a more open environment.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, I think this question is a bond question for our work with the redesigns. Will elementary students from Ashton still be going to the high school for learning?
You know, that's a good question. I know that part of the plan when we're actually doing construction, the addition, for example, at Ashton, we're going to need to move students from Ashton. Currently, the plan is to the trans building at the high school. So that is the plan. As I recall, it's been a while since I've had a chance to review the plans. But the trans building, the plan is to use the trans building as a transitional location for schools, elementary schools, while the construction is taking place. And there are additions being added to both Cumberland Hill and Ashton. Actually, several of our buildings, Community's another one that's going to be getting a pretty significant addition with a new cafeteria. Same is true with Garvin. So just about all of our buildings are going to be getting some additional work. So to answer the question, while the work at Ashton is underway, those students will be temporarily located in the trans building.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I think that's a lot of them.
Another hand up if you want to take that.
Sure.
Sure.
Sebastian Folpema.
Good evening. First of all, I must say tonight was impressive and very encouraging. So thank you for your hard work. I have a question about transitioning from the hybrid to the virtual, from the virtual to the hybrid model, specifically the Mondays when both the A and B groups are, in class. How does that work on those Mondays once we're in the hybrid model? Will both A and B groups be physically in school, or will that be a virtual day?
So the anticipation, well, not the anticipation, what we're building is Monday being a virtual day where both A and B students so it'd be a continuation of the same type of structure where both groups are logging into their Google Meets to work with their teachers. And then we're currently working with our teachers to establish what the framework for that day should look like with a full class roster in on that day.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that wraps it up for the evening. And if there are any questions that that you had posted that we were not able to get to, please email one of us or your principal, and we'll be sure to give you that information. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this information and the answers to your questions assisted with, ease the stress of moving into some uncharted waters. So thank you again. Have a good evening, and we look forward to starting the school year.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, and thank you, Mr. Damana, as well. And Mr. Chandler. Always Mr. Chandler.
Nicely done, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.